Welcome to another episode of First 40. This is the deck building series where we go through each of the legends, talk a little bit about what my first 40 cards in a deck would be, and what some other cards out there that I may consider going forward as I continue to test these legends. This time we've got Ornn, and I want to jump in with Voltron-Ornn is what we're going to play around today. It is Fire Below the Mountain with the Forge God in the champion zone, getting that deflect to Weapon Master and getting +1 for each friendly gear. This is going to be all in Forge God, utilizing the legend ability to be able to get equipment out much easier without having to deramp, and then play entirely around a massive Forge God with Spellsonger on it to make it that deflect 4 and just infinity might on top of it. So we'll talk about this. I think a lot of players have been going towards this direction and trying this out. I think it's a really fun way to play Ornn. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to land in the meta, but it's at least very entertaining, and I think it's a cool place to start. So let's go ahead and take a look at the battlefields. It's just going to be some stalling battlefields, or some battlefields that are just helping us get towards that late game, end game, Exodia Ornn that cannot be stopped. With Aspirin's Climb to slow down the game, just make it so that everyone has to get one more point, gets to 9. Obelisk of Power, so that we can just ramp into the Ornn and all the equipment a little bit faster. And Paper Tree, because a lot of the early game we don't get on board, so if our opponent holds it, at least we get a little value, as every rune for us, I think, is going to be more valuable than the runes for the opponent throughout the game. So let's jump in and take a little bit of a look at the deck here. As you can see, this is all in on the Forge God. There are a total of 5 units in the deck, including our champion zone, with Ornn and just Azir. And Azir's job in this deck is to pivot the Forge God around. Once you get the Ornn to a battlefield, oftentimes your opponent is going to try and play to the other battlefield and try and make it tough for Ornn to actually get any combats and clear things. Azir allows you to use the action to swap with Ornn so that he can move back to base and then move to the other battlefield, or even send in Azir and then swap the Ornn from there, because it is at action speed that Azir can do the swap. So just trying to be able to get this Forge God a little bit more mobile and dealing with your opponent in that way. And from there, I mean, the deck, it's a simple idea. We are just going to play the green seals because we're playing a lot of different green power costs throughout the game, and they're a gear, so you get additional value. Ornn gets to play it for free, and it's going to give that +1 to the Forge God. Poro Snacks are going to be a really nice way for us to cycle the deck, get some early draw. And then we're playing every copy of Counterspell we can, and every copy of Protection that we can, alongside some card draw and ramp, to just try and find all the combo pieces. So we've got Defy, Windwall, and Not So Fast. Defy able to answer the cheap spells that are going to be attempting to deal with Ornn, things like the Hidden Blades, the Call the Weaks of yellow, anything small that's trying to get there. Windwall's going to have to deal with any of the big spells, like the Time Warp's trying to play around the Ornn, or any other the bigger kill spells. And then Not So Fast can also deal with some of those bigger kill spells, and it can even protect spells, gear, from getting destroyed by certain spells, which can be helpful as we continue on with like what the core of this deck is. Because the real combo of what we're doing is Forge God, Spellsonger. That is the big crux of what makes this work and what makes this annoying, is that Spellsonger gives Ornn an additional deflect 2 and makes it so he gains an additional might for each friendly gear. And when you start stacking up the amount of gear that you can with this deck, you end up with like a 50 might Ornn just running around with deflect 4 and infinite counterspells. So when your opponent tries to deal with the Ornn, they have to give up a bunch of their runes only to have the spell that they use to deal with the Ornn countered. And that's where this kind of comes in. Once you really get online, you're able to have enough cards in hand where you've got the counterspells available. He gets really belligerent and difficult to deal with without, specific tech pieces. So from there, the other equipment that's kind of key to this setup becomes the World Atlas, because once you have the World Atlas equipped with the Spellsonger, you're actually creating a bunch of these gold gear tokens that are then giving you +2 might per gold gear token. So if you hold, you now add +4 might to your Ornn once he has the Spellsonger equipped, because he's getting all this extra might from the gold gear. So there's this like very funny cycle of like hold one location, with the World Atlas, get that gold ramped up, and then just make the Ornn stronger and stronger every single turn, and he just becomes completely unstoppable. The other gear that you have is, hey, I don't have enough counterspells, so we need some revival effects for Ornn. If someone does finally actually kill him, you've got Guardian Angel and you've got Zhonya's to try and bring him back immediately so that he's not just getting completely taken out. And that goes alongside the other piece of mobility. I talked about how Azir, the other unit in, is just for that mobility. You also have Shurelya's Requiem. This is the only signature of his that I really consider for like a main deck first 40 kind of situation, where this basically reads, when you play this, ready your unit, so it can be used to not only the first time you play it pivot around an Ornn, but after that, once you equip it to Ornn, he's just going to have ganking. So the rest of the game, you don't even have to worry about the Azirs swapping him around. You can actually just gank him back and forth between the battlefields, which is incredibly powerful to have. It makes Shurelya is just a must-have for this style of deck, where you just start becoming this gatekeeper Ornn that is just impossible to move. And it's really fun to play because it requires very specific tech to deal with it, things like Downwell, things like Rebuke, but even then, you've got the counterspells to deal with those, so your opponent has to find an opportunity to actually be able to push this Ornn back once he's set up. And once you fully get there, at that point, you just need cards. You need to draw the answers. So that's where your Poro Snacks come in. Your Consult the Pass. You just want card draw, right? And I've even included a cheeky premonition, because at a certain point, you've got this like infinite gold stack from World Atlas, and all you need are the correct counter spells to deal with anything your opponent is trying to throw at the Ornn. And premonition is just going to be a draw 3 at a low energy cost, so that you can still keep up the runes to find more. I've seen Progress Day used in similar way. I think in my mind, I like premonition a little bit better, just because of exactly that, right? Like, you want to cast the draw spell and then have energy to play the protection spells. You don't want to just spend all of your energy just drawing into protection spells and then not be able to actually cast them. So that's the general idea of Ornn. When you're mulliganing in your early game, you want to search exactly for, you want to find Spellsonger, you need 1 copy of that, and then you want to find the counter spells that are most useful to you, and then things like Poro Snacks for your early stages of the game are nice because it's a 1 card that just becomes 2 cards instead, and having more cards is just important for this. So, Find Your Center, Poro Snacks are nice early plays, and then also just any of the gear are things that you're going to want to be looking for, because even once you stack multiple Spellsongers, it can be okay as well, even if that's not the best use of your early game. It does not scale exponentially, but it would be 2 deflect on base Ornn, 4 deflect with 1 Spellsonger, 6 deflect with 2, plus the additional might for all of the gear. It gets really, really crazy, and it is a lot of fun. It is really just this, I build this mega tank that no one can clear type of deck, and I think a lot of people enjoy it. So this is a really great core for the deck, but this is definitely built to be adjusted. I'm playing a lot of 3-ofs in this deck. I don't think that's necessary. I think you can trim to a lot of 2s. So let's take a look at that maybe board and look at some of the other cards that you can consider bringing in to adjust this deck or augment this deck. I think the first one to look at is Charm. This potentially could even go in your main. I just kind of considered, well, I just want to put the 3s in there, really showcase what this like Voltron Ornn looks like. But Charm being able to just be an effective 1 energy removal when you have such a big unit like the Ornn, I think is really efficient, and it's very likely that this is always going to make your deck. I think Bellows Breath is a good way to deal with a lot of the little token units that are potentially running around on the back row. This can help against like Victor decks that are trying to spam a bunch of tokens and then do some kind of massive grand stratagem, which is a way that you could potentially outmight an Ornn, and that's a way that Ornn can definitely lose if you're ever able to beat his might. So Bellows Breath is a nice way to clean that up, is really good. I included a couple 2-drops and like low drops you can consider. If you don't want to go so all in with the Ornn as a whole, I think, Plundering Poro, Lonely Poro, Watchful Sentry are ideas where the gold is helpful for your deck, and then the other 2 just replace themselves if you don't want to completely concede the early game. And on top of that, I think both Pit Crew and Drop Border are able to be triggered very easily by this kind of deck if you want some kind of early to mid-game accelerate to deal with any really fast deck that is not giving you the space to get online. So I think these are some cool ideas for low cost that I would maybe think about for this deck, because they can solve problems that you might run into when trying to play this Ornn list. From there, I do have Meditation as another draw option, as well as the Progress Day. We're looking at, this is literally just a combo deck that's trying to like build this Voltron with all the protection. So anything that draws cards in the colors, I think there is consideration to, hey, maybe that's something that I actually do want to play. And then I have Forgefire Cape in here as a sideboard option because this deal 2 to all enemy units here. This can deal with basically stopping Imperial Decree from actually ever killing your Ornn, even without having to expend a counterspell on it. If they only have a bunch of tokens and you play a Forgefire Cape, that Decree, every time they try and run in to hit the Ornn, they're just going to die to the Forgefire Cape. So it's a cool counter tech to yellow token techs that are continuing to try and take you out with some of those, with a spell like Imperial Decree. Mystic Reversal, if you felt like 9 counterspells wasn't enough, Mystic Reversal can be your 10th through 12th counterspell. I think this one's a little bit more silly, but I also think that if there's any deck that I'm going to consider maybe playing even more counterspells in, it might just be this kind of style of Ornn list. From there, I have a cheeky little gear here that I'm not sure how good it is the Hex Tech Anomaly. This has reaction, pay any amount of power to add that much energy. I mentioned you kind of get this like infinite supply of gold from the World Atlases generally in the games that you're playing Ornn. And so being able to like spend the stack of gold to become infinite energy if you've tapped out and still be able to play your counter spells is actually pretty unique. And this gear gives you that kind of safety net of if you had to spend too much energy on your turn and now your opponent untaps, you actually still have access to this like reserve source of energy by paying power at reaction speed. So I think Anomaly kind of has this cool potential interaction for the deck. And the last 3 are some, big hitters, some big spells, big units. I have Singularity. This, I think, is kind of straightforward. If you have a lot of opposing units that are kind of at this like 6 might breakpoint and it feels like you need a way to deal with it, you're in blue. You have access to Singularity. Don't be afraid to run a kill spell that may be useful to you. And then Tiana, I thought was kind of fun. The pivoting seems a little bit better with like the Azir and then the Shurelyas. But Tiana is another option of like, you put the Ornn at a battlefield, and then you have the Tiana there, and your opponent can't just like win by holding. They have to eventually deal with the Tiana or the Ornn. And Tiana, at the very least, the first turn you play it is going to deny that hold point. So I think there's maybe some ideas with Tiana. There's even some like funny ideas of like playing Doran's Shield. I don't have this listed in the maybe board because I think it would specifically be with like a Tiana strategy where you get Doran's Shield and you put it on the Ornn, and then it has tank. And you put a Tiana next to the Ornn, and now they can only kill Tiana with spells, but you have 9 counter spells. And it's just this funny idea of like, oh, they can never actually score a point at that point. I don't know. It's kind of a meme. I don't know if it actually works, but just a funny idea with Tiana. And Time Warp is the last one. This one is like kind of self-explanatory. You're a big body with the Ornn Forge God, but you can only play one side. I think the pivoting's generally better, but Time Warp is the ability to just stay on the single battlefield you're on and then potentially end the game with the warp, or even allow you to pivot the Ornn because you could hold one side, move home, Time Warp to ready him to then pivot, but that's not very efficient use of resources, and I prefer the Azirs overall to Time Warp, but I do think that the Time Warp is a card that you're always going to want to consider when you're in a blue deck like this that is going to have a lot of runes, going to have a lot of gold, and potentially looking for those endgame strategies. So that's kind of the maybe board for Ornn. I think this deck, it probably has a lot of room to be refined and being taken care of, but this is Voltron Ornn. If you want to make a big guy, put a bunch of gear on him, and make him impossible to remove, this is the idea. This is the start, and this is a really good starting point for you to just kind of take that journey and dive into Ornn and go have fun playing this Voltron deck. And I think it does a powerful enough thing, and it can be annoying for even a deck like Draven to deal with, which is, the big boogeyman of the format, because, like, targeting an Ornn with Fortiflect is not a fun experience, especially when your spell then just gets defied or countered. So yeah, here's the Voltron Ornn. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what cards you think I'm missing from this, what legends you want to see in the future, and if you like the video, please remember to subscribe. Thanks so much. I'll see you for the next one.